Okay then, with looking at the time, perhaps we should get the show on the road. So welcome to everybody and thank you for joining today. So I'm Margaret Quinn of ERNACT, and ERNACT is part of the Data2Sustain European Digital Innovation Hub here in the northwest of Ireland. And Data2Sustain is running a series of digital technology webinars that are of specific interest to the public sector. And this is part of that series, Artificial Intelligence in the Public Sector. It's a vast topic, so today we're hoping to give you some inspiration and kindle your interest in the topic to take it further. So today we have two presenters from within our Data2Sustain consortium. That's myself and our program leader, Mike Conroy. But we are really happy that this is supplemented by speakers from a Swedish European Digital Innovation Hub, Digital Impact North, and from a French regional AI agency, ERNIA, plus a leading AI and data analytics training company from Ireland, Chrysalis. So I think we've got a great lineup and I'm really looking forward to hearing their presentations. So we're kicking off with Mike Conroy, Director of REDIH. And Mike is, as I said, the Director of Data2Sustain. So it's a newly established EDIH, one of 4 in Ireland. And prior to leading Data2Sustain, Mike held engineering VP, managing director, and site executive roles over a 20-year period in 3 multinational operations. So his background is industry. So you take over then, Mike.
Thanks very much, Margaret. Thank you so much and welcome. As Margaret said, I'll give you a brief overview of Data2Sustain and the European Digital Innovation Hub Network. I think today's meeting is a great example of the part of the network we're bringing together real world use case, perspectives and updates and ideas from our colleagues in Sweden, France, and Ireland. So, Maisha, if you could just move to the next slide. So just for anybody joining afresh and unfamiliar with digital innovation hubs in an Ireland or international context, large European program that brings together digital innovation assets across Europe, and specifically in Ireland, there's 4 funded digital innovation hubs. Some are probably quite high profile in the public mind, like CEDAR, National AI Centre, Factory Exchange, which is focused on Industry 4.0. 2 new hubs, Data2Sustain, which I have the pleasure to bring the team together on, which is largely based on the Atlantic Technology University, University of Galway, and regional development agencies, and especially ERNACT, which Margaret and Maisha are on today from, and their sort of vast European and national network is fantastic to bring events like this together. So we focus on bringing some digital expertise across sectors. If you want to reach out, just you can get us on any of those contact details are on the website, and we'd love to talk. So next slide, just very briefly, the innovation hubs are really about bringing together new digital business models, sectoral innovation, technology and software. And on the bottom of the slide is some of the areas of disruptive innovation and just ongoing digital adoption across many sectors. Today, we're very focused probably on the crossover between public sector impact and the application of generative AI and other AI across a whole range of areas, from transport to environment to public services and food, etc., etc. So really looking forward to some interesting use cases, and connecting anybody in the call subsequently with any of the speakers or back with the EDIH network in Ireland. And then just finally, again, for anybody who is new to the European Digital Innovation Network, if you go to the next slide, Maisha. Yeah, I'll just briefly say it. There is some eligibility criteria, but it's very broad. The categories fall into innovation services, but events like this are constructing and orchestrating events around bringing together an ecosystem of expertise, not just regionally, but nationally and potentially internationally. Members of the consortium also bring, skills and training and business support skills. And the eligibility is pretty broad in terms of the enterprise community, up to 3,000 staff. And effectively, it's free services offset against de minimis state aid is the primary business model. There are others. And obviously, the services can also be applied to public bodies, community, not-for-profit, and et cetera, et cetera. So with that boring stuff, we'll get on to the really good, interesting stuff. And so I'll hand it back to Margaret, and really looking forward to the updates from everybody on the call.
Okay, Maisha, can you go on to the next slide? We'll stick with this presentation. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to give you a fairly quick overview about AI's potential in the public sector. And the reason I'm talking about this, well, my background is, yes, with ERNACT, working on regional digital transformation on EU projects in the digitech sphere. Prior to that, I worked in a medtech company and became very much aware of how AI can be used for good in digital pathology. And my interest in AI goes back to 2013, when I thought it was going to be big. And I did an online course with Stanford, Coursera, but it's taken a long time to take off. So next slide, please. AI in Ireland is, well, the government certainly believes it's going to be very impactful for public services. And I've got a quote there from Minister O'Donoghue. And the Irish ambition in AI, as you can see, I've got a quote there from our AI Here for Good, the National AI Strategy. Ireland is aiming to be an international leader in using AI to benefit our economy and society. And I've pulled out, the government's been providing supports. There's a guidelines on AI adoption in the public service, and there's a great AI Foundation certificate for public servants, which is provided by the Department of Education and Reform. And that comes out periodically and it's funded. Next slide, please. So the other reason I'm talking here today is ERNACT is leading an Interreg project called Enabler, which is misspelt there. Sorry about that. And Enabler is aiming to try and enable an AI-driven public service. And some of the speakers on here today I've connected through this Enabler project. Next slide. The partners in Enabler come from 5 regions. We have 8 partners, and we're working together to see how AI can play a vital role if the public sector can be empowered to use AI. And that's the objective of our project. Next slide, please. So what we want to do is build the capacity of public sector organisations, that's including ourselves, empower the public sector to be an early adopter, and take into account the need for more open, transparent and ethical policies and services. So we'll be adopting policies to support those objectives in each of our regions. Next slide, please. Even the topic of AI is not easy to define, and that was the first step in our project, learning what is AI and what isn't AI, and understanding what it's about. Now, whenever you see anything mentioning AI, it always has one of these pictures involved, which is something looking really sci-fi, out of this world, extraordinary. And the message we want to get to you today is that's not the case. All of us can make use of AI. It's not super futuristic. It's not going to take us over. AI is about using computer systems to do tasks that normally need human intelligence, like understanding language, images, and making decisions. Next slide, please. So within our project, we've been trying to understand our own regional, national and international context about AI. We've been learning from each other with workshops and webinars, and we are developing regional stakeholder groups to spread this kind of interest and the discussion. Next slide, please. Now, how can AI help in the public sector? This is one slide, and it packed into it is so much in so many different areas. AI is vast, and its potential in the public sector is also quite vast. So if you look at one component, natural language processing, how can that help? Well, chatbots is a clear one for the public sector, and we'll be hearing more about those from other speaker. Large language models have emerged only as we started the project. And in the area of knowledge management, trying to make vast amounts of data accessible, understandable for different people, all that kind of knowledge management and communication, citizen engagement comes through that power of AI. The other part, computer vision, where AI understands and can analyze images, has vast applications in the public services, in things like land classification and other areas. I mentioned digital pathology, where AI is already incredibly impactful. So digitized biopsies of potentially cancerous cells can be identified by AI solutions, as well as a highly trained pathologist. And even more than that, it can also start to be used to make identify patterns in people that can identify cancer way before it's actually developed. So there's a lot of power there. And then in predictive analytics for engineering maintenance, AI can be used for that as well. Driverless cars are all about AI, autonomous systems. Eve is going to be telling us about generative AI and how that can help all of us across all sorts of different, every sector, really. Decision support is another key one. How to make better decisions based on evidence. AI can be a massive help as well. And even in robotics, there will be future applications where AI can be of use. Next slide, please. Well, it's not easy, and there's quite a few barriers to adopting AI. The first one we're trying to counteract today, low awareness and understanding of AI and the hype and fear and misconceptions around it. There are concerns on ethics and trust, but we have the AI Act, and there are ways to take that into account, and Ulf is going to discuss that with us. Currently, we're at the start of the adoption in the public services, so it is patchy, but that's going to change as we go ahead. And then the data is a key part of AI. Data needs to be clean and quality data and not siloed. So that's another part. Trust, culture, infrastructure, and a key one there, skills. People will need to be upskilled to understand how to use AI, to understand its potential and how to implement. It's not an easy area to keep up with because of exponential growth in the number of tools that are out there, like ChatGPT, the large language model, was the most got the most traction of, I think, any other application beforehand. Next slide, please. A report from the UK really highlighted the barriers for AI adoption, and a very key one to come out of this AI adoption, putting AI into action, was trust. Trust is everything, because if an AI solution is implemented and people don't trust it, the efficiency you want to get from the AI solution disappears because people are checking and not relying on the AI solution. So that was an interesting report that highlighted those kind of barriers. Next slide, please. And then why are you doing it? AI needs to be, you don't do it just because it's nice to do. It's got to be aligned with your general strategy. People need skills, processes need to be adapted maybe, and there are ethical considerations, and again, data and technology are all key. That came from Deloitte. Next slide, please, Maisha. So between ourselves, we've been exchanging a lot of knowledge and learning from each of our partners. And I've just highlighted some of the topics we've been discussing with different study visits in the Enabler project. And through these, we've learned quite a lot about use cases. And today you're going to hear about some of those from our speakers. Next slide, please. Here I've highlighted how AI is being used and can be used in a range of public sectors, covering education, planning, climate, citizen engagement, administration, healthcare, roads, and tourism. And there are so many, the potential is vast, and some of them are using computer vision, others are using predictive analytics, but there's a really massive range of possibilities. Next slide, please. And this is just highlighting a few. I don't want to dwell on these because I'll be stepping into the presentation by Victor, who I stole some of these from. So we'll go on to the next slide. I wanted to highlight this use of a chatbot, which actually came before large language model ChatGPT, and it's being used in Derry and Strabane District Council. So chatbots are used in the private sector, but not so much in the public sector. So RIA, Recycling Information Assistant, helps the council.
Data2Sustain.
Sorry, can everybody go on mute? I hear somebody. It's a chatbot which will tell the citizen when they answer their questions about recycling, gives nudges to the citizen to be greener, and really frees up the counselling recycling staff from answering the phone and answering repetitive mundane questions. RIA does that for them now, and also gives them advice on what they could do to be better, greener. So next slide, please. And in our own organisation, ERNACT, we've been trying as well to play with AI and try and use a chatbot internally. We have lots and lots of EU projects with very long documents, PDFs, describing proposals. So we're trying to use ERNI to help people understand what's hidden away in these vast documents and make it a lot more accessible and easy for ourselves to be more efficient and understand it. Next slide. So I think I'm just about on time. So my message is out there for you is AI is here to stay. It's going to continue to flourish and grow. So don't be scared of it, embrace it. Try and discover what it can do for you as a person, an individual. It can help people individually, but also on an organizational basis, and then upskill. There's lots of online AI modular flexible courses for everyone, from the most technical to just pure business users. Or the other possibility, we've got lots of possibilities in Ireland for customized courses. So the last one, experiment, pilot and learn, and Data2Sustain can assist you. So get in touch. So that's all from me. And the next about questions. And this is where I've omitted to say, if anybody objects to this event being recorded, please be aware that it is being recorded. I should have said that before I spoke, so apologies. And the next speaker on the Q&A as well. So if there's time, a speaker can take questions. Otherwise, please put them in the chat, or we have a section at the end where we can answer questions. So our next speaker is Aoife Darcy, and Aoife is Chief Executive of Chrysalis. So I'll stop sharing. And we're welcoming Aoife. We're very glad to have Aoife with us. She's spent the last 20 years developing data-driven solutions and processes for national, international companies in sectors like banking, finance, manufacturing, gaming, and developing expertise in analytics strategy, machine learning and AI, training and mentoring. So Aoife started Chrysalis in 2009 to support in-house analytics and talent in organizations. And the the business is now a prominent AI data analytics consultancy and training organisation. So I hand over to you, and thank you very much, Eva, for joining us.
No problem, Margaret, and thank you for the lovely introduction, and thanks for having me here today, to yourself and Mike. It's lovely to be able to chat to people today. And I suppose I've entitled my talk for today called Gen AI, What's All the Hype About? And I suppose it's to try and demystify a little bit around what generative AI is all about. And maybe to talk about some useful use cases. I know, Margaret, there you talked there about chatbots. So we might have a little bit of a look at, we might just use good old ChatGPT, just to think about how we might use some of these tools, I suppose, in a more useful way. And as Margaret alluded to in her talk, like generative AI is only one part of artificial intelligence. Okay, and there are lots of other different areas of artificial intelligence, but for this I'll concentrate on Gen AI. So I suppose when we think about generative AI, there's been so much in the press about various applications, both positive and negative. I thought we'd start with a few of those. So here, I think this is a kind of really nice. This is a generated image to go with the presentation title, and we were preparing for the AI wave. So we styled this in the famous Chinese picture of a wave, and basically asked ChatGPT to generate an image, and there it generated an image like this, which is actually quite nice and quite beautiful. And as an image generation sometimes gets a little bit of a bad rap, but actually this does quite a good job. So there are some positive things that we can do with Gen AI. There's also the bad. So this is kind of a famous example that has come up, where it was Google's AI chatbot, essentially, and somebody asked that their cheese was sliding off their pizza, and they wanted ways to make the cheese stick to the pizza. So here, one of the suggestions was you can add 1/8 of a cup of non-toxic glue to the sauce to make it more tacky. Right, and now obviously you are not going to be adding glue to your tomato sauce to make your cheese stick on your pizza, and this seems absurd. And this is the idea, we'll call them hallucinations. So what I want to do is I'll explain a little bit about how Gen AI works, particularly with text, and hopefully it'll make a little bit of sense to how things like this kind of appear. And this is why we need to be careful with some of these tools and in using them. And then I suppose the ugly, this is where, so the middle example there is just, like you'd like to think most people with common sense reading this are not going to put glue in their tomato sauce. Okay, there's a certain amount of, you'd read it and kind of laugh. The third example, though, is this is an example where a company was actually scammed out of 25 million euro.
I can't hear anyone.
Are you just checking?
I think somebody probably pressed mute all,
Eva.
and when you mute all,
someone mute everyone. Sorry. That's okay. No problem. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
So sorry. So this example here, the ugly is one where large organization, the chief operating officer went on to a call with 3 of his senior executives, and they told him he needed to transfer $25 million to a certain account for a certain reason. And this didn't seem like an odd thing to do until it turned out that each of the people who were talking to were actually completely fake. They were completely generated with Gen AI and didn't exist as people at all. And actually he transferred the money basically to criminals. It was a criminal hack. So, and this was the chief investigating officer, and I suppose he was like, it turns out everybody was fake on the call. right? So this is where I suppose we need to think about how we use these tools, but in a way, and Margaret talked about it there, in a way that's safe. Okay, that's one of the things, and we need to build trust into our systems. So when we think about generative AI, basically just in terms of where it sits in the world of AI, so we have this big circle is just AI in general. The main technique that's used in AI, and I don't want you to worry too much about it, is this technique, a set of techniques or algorithms known as machine learning. And these are the techniques that basically learn trends from data. And this is why data becomes really important. Because essentially we have these algorithms that learn all these trends from data. We have deep learning, which is just fancy machine learning. And inside deep learning, this is where generative AI sits. Okay. So if we're thinking about kind of a definition for it, it's a set of deep learning techniques that can be used to generate new data. And that's the whole thing. It can generate new images, it can generate text, it can generate video. I think we now have a tool that can generate music. Okay, so it can generate lots of different things. So what I want to do now, and very quickly in the next kind of 3 or 4 minutes, is just talk about, kind of go behind the curtain a little bit and lift up the bonnet of the hood and think about what happens, how does Gen AI work, right? And specifically, I'm going to look at language models because I think they're probably the ones where we possibly have the most use cases for that are doable. So first of all, language models aren't new. Okay, we've been using them for years. Anybody who has a mobile phone, who's used any sort of text application, will be used to this idea of being able to put in a part of a sentence and getting up the next word. Okay, and this is essentially a language model in work. Okay, what it does is if we give it a prompt, it'll give us a selection of what are the most likely next words. So this is what language models do. And basically they are trained on data to learn, if I get a prompt of a start of a word or start of a sentence, it just finishes them off. Okay, so it's like, think of it as a sentence completer. Okay, and these were the kind of early stage language models. This is how they worked. Okay, so given a prompt, the model predicts the most likely next word. All right, and these can be easily generated. Okay, in terms of the data that you need, so you can get something like Wikipedia and you can generate these tools. So essentially what I can do is I can take Wikipedia, I can get lots and lots of data where I take parts of sentences, give my algorithm the next word. This is what I'm going to try and predict. I pass this through machine learning algorithm and I will get a language model. Okay, now this is going to be pretty basic, but it'll work. So now if I take my language model and if I say the cow is feeling, it might tell me that the cow is feeling hungry because it's most likely next word. So where does the generative bit come in? And this is one thing that people will know when, if they've used ChatGPT or anything like that, they'll know that these language models sometimes kind of, you give it the same prompt, it'll give you different words or different endings. So here, what we do, instead of just choosing the next best word, we basically have a distribution of words. So now, when we think about the cow is feeling, we can have the cow is feeling tired or the cow is feeling emotional. And this is where those differences come up from prompt to prompt to prompt. This is why, it generates something slightly different every time because of this. Now, how did we go from this to ChatGPT? Basically, scale. Okay, so we had faster models, we had more data, and we had oodles of computation. Okay, and like the scale of what it takes to build these large language models like ChatGPT is hard to imagine. Like, you were talking the energy to sustain a small country. You were talking about the number of GPUs, that again, multiple universities would use. Okay, it's just humongous, and there is a question mark around kind of the cost of these models, whether or not they're really feasible, both the physical cost, the dollar cost, but also the cost to the environment. So there are question marks around that and things to think about. But really what I want to talk about and kind of show very quickly in the next 5 minutes or so is the idea of how we can use these. So anybody who's used ChatGPT will go into it and go, yeah, if it's kind of useful, but it doesn't always have the most up-to-date information, or it isn't tailored to what I want. Okay, it isn't tailored maybe to our documentation. And this is where you can build what we call custom chatbots. Okay, our custom Q&A type models. And what we do here is we use the language model as a foundation. Okay, so essentially what I do is I get a set of documents, and rather than trying to build my own language model, what I do is I use the language model just to encode these documents. It basically puts these documents into a big database of numbers. Okay. Then if I take a question that I want to ask of these documents, the LMN will encode my question, and it'll search the database using that encoded question, right? And basically what it looks for things in this database that are similar to the question. And then it just returns the documents that has similarities. Now you can stop at this point and just have the documents. But actually what a lot of people are doing is then they're using the LMN to generate a summary. Okay. Now you kind of go, okay, that's interesting. And this is kind of where people are using. So rather than using the LMN on its own, they're pointing the LMN at a document base that basically you can use, and then you can ask questions of that document base, and it almost becomes just a clever search engine that will also write some nice text. So what I'm going to do very quickly is show you how this idea would work in something like ChatGPT. Okay, so what I'm going to do in ChatGPT, and this is one that I prepared earlier, but I'll start a new chat. So let me just go to ChatGPT, and I'm going to start a message. But what I'm going to hear, instead of just asking ChatGPT, I'm just going to very quickly upload a document. And I'm actually going to upload, Margaret mentioned this, the National AI Strategy. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to upload this document, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask ChatGPT questions about this document, and I wanted to get the answers from this document. So I'm going to ask it, can you summarize this document? Okay. So here it's going to give me a summary of this document. And this is where I can see kind of our ability for, particularly for public sector bodies that have very large document bases, either around policies, maybe parliamentary questions, lots of documents that you search all the time and you get information from, and it's quite a time consuming kind of task. Okay. So this idea of, here I just have one document, but let's say I had all of the government strategies. Okay. And let's say I want to ask something. So I am a member of the public. Can you summarize this document? So now I'm giving it kind of more information about what I want the summary to be targeted on. And this is actually something that these large language models are good at, right? Can you summarize this document for me? Okay. So here it's summarizing it. For me, as somebody, I suppose, then kind of that I don't have particularly good skills, it's making it kind of simpler. And let's say I want this document summarized for a business audience. So, can you summarize this document in 5 points for senior business leaders. So you can start to see the text here kind of changes. So if we look up at the text earlier on here, for somebody in general public, it was AI is developed in a way that puts people first, whereas now we have the strategy emphasizes people-centric ethical approach to AI development and use. So even though it's summarizing the same document, I've asked it to target it at a different type of audience, and therefore the way it summarized it is different. And that for me is the language model piece working, okay? Where we can use all that intelligent information that it's learned about language. So ChatGPT has learned lots about language, okay? And I've asked it to summarize something very specific. So I've given it what I wanted to summarize. And this is probably, for me, one of the most safest way of using these models, because that idea, you can target the documents that you want summarized or the information that you want passed on to people, but you can use the strength of the language model to put some nice language context around what you're asking it to search. Okay. And for me, given that public sector is so heavily, there's lots of documentation, I think there's lots of options here. Again, you need to put all the guardrails in place. Lots of testing is required. You can still get hallucinations. You can still get things that you mightn't want. But definitely for me, the way that I think Gen AI can be used in a relatively safe way. Again, as I said, guardrails need to be put in place, but in a very useful way across the public sector. So I'm now going to stop talking, Margaret, because I've gone over by a couple of minutes, and I'm going to hand over to our next speaker. And I think we're going to have Q&A at the end, so we'll probably take some questions.
There is already a question for you, Eva, in the chat, but we can come to that at the end. And thanks for that insight into generative AI, and it's great to have very practical examples of great use case there. So now we're having a sandwich, as I said, of powerful use cases, and in between we're getting into the filling of ethical considerations of AI, which of course is absolutely central to the ethos of the public sector. So I hand it over now to Ulf, and Ulf is a professor from Umeå University, and he's way up in the north of Sweden. As I mentioned before, he's from the European Digital Innovation Hub, Digital Impact North, and he's been a researcher and teacher since the late 80s, and he's got a very special interest in human-computer interaction and computer-supported collaborative work and learning. So he's been involved in projects and skills training with local and regional governments in Sweden and Norway, especially in the area of system analysis, business process development, and citizen-centric approaches. And they have a wealth of knowledge in Umeå and in Ulf about ethics. So we have a great speaker here to help us understand this topic. Thanks, Ulf.
Thank you very much. I hope you see my PowerPoint. I will perhaps start with say something about the informatics, because it's quite interesting to understand the subject of informatics, because it's a rather new topic. We belong to social science, so we are not belonging to a technical faculty, and the reason was, in the middle of the 60s, the state government in Sweden wanted to have a research a subject that focused on the consequences and the impact of digitalization, especially in public sector in the 60s, because the reason was that most of our systems in the 60s was implemented in large scale in the public sector and not in the business sector. So that's the reason we have a special topics in Scandinavia that is called informatics, or in the middle of the 60s, it was called administrative data processing. But when we talk about ethical consideration, especially when it comes to the AI, we surely have heard lots of concepts when we started discussing of the impact of using AI, and we hear about that we need to have transparency, the trust issue that Margaret talked about. We have biases, or that the system starts to hallucinate, that we saw some kind of examples from the previous presenter. So we have lots of concepts that comes up when we talk about ethical considerations. But are these concepts or methods or policies new ones? Have we not already had these kind of discussions already in Sweden, for instance, in the 60s? Because we can start to remember of the books we have perhaps read when we studied in the young time, like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World from 1932, or Orwell's 1984, or perhaps the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where they try to answer, the supercomputer tries to answer the question of the meaning of life by the number of 42 was the answer. And when we look at that kind of literature and we compare to the debates about AI and ethics, it seems like we have already forgot that our digital systems that we have designed and implemented since the early 60s are in fact already socio-technical systems. And if there is something I would like you to remember from my presentation, is that you have to understand that all systems are designed by someone, for someone, and with a purpose. So we have to understand that we always has a designer, and we always has a client, and we always has a purpose. And that's independent if we talk about systems that have developed in the 60s, or if we talk about implementing or designing a new AI system. So we have always someone. So we have human people who is deciding about something when it comes to the digital systems. And this has not been a quiet discussion if you look at the last 30 years. We have lots of methods, we have lots of techniques that has dwelt the issue about how to deal with the ethical consideration when we are building our information systems. So in Scandinavia, for instance, we have had lots of waves going on from the 70s. So we have at least 3 paradigms in the Scandinavian tradition when we talk about method development or practices, how to design systems towards especially the public sector. And usually we have this the first way where we talk about optimizing and using the computer in an efficient way. And usually it has been an interest of maximizing the profit or saving some money by making the system more efficiently. But we also have seen the impact and the discussion about what will happen with the worker situation when we automate the organization in an advanced level. So lots of methods that has been developed around the world has been on the social technical tradition, where we have, for instance, Enid Mumford, who developed the method that was called ethics, that focused on job satisfaction by the user employed in the public sector. So it has been lots of interest of how to make the user comfortable of using the technology. So it enhanced the worker rather than reduce him to some poor guy who has to work with just fulfilling the goals from the computer system. And we also have had in the Scandinavian that we will see perhaps some of the parts around connected to AI Act. Perhaps it's the critical dimension of what the impact of using computers in society. And in Scandinavia, we had lots of different attempts to build system development methods that connected, for instance, the unions as a partner when we designed the information system. So it was not only the individual worker they included in the method, it was also a political dimension, and they then put in the unions into the methods. And the impact of these waves of development of methods had also impact on the legislation in Scandinavia and in Sweden. The effects of making these kind of developments of methods, because everything was connected. The bad guys in the 60s, in the 70s, and the beginning of the 80s was the state government, because they had all the big systems. So that's why we have this literature like 1984, because it's someone in the state government who is in charge. But today we have not the state government that we are afraid for. It's the big tech companies instead. But the effect was the legislation that we in Sweden got already in the 70s and the beginning of the 80s. So we had an act called the Determination of Work Life, the Employment Protection Act, and we already had the GDPR already in 1973 as a consequence at working with this kind of paradigms. So when we talk about ethics in AI, we also can see three different ways where we have different focus on what we're talking when we talk about ethics. So the first wave was that we can call it the philosophical approach, where we had lots of people that was invited to develop codes and standards that became more or less some kind of guidance. But most of the criticism of these attempts was that they was talking about ethic washing. So that, and the reason was that most of the people that was involved in developing these, in the case of this picture, it's the 74 principles, was that the big tech companies was those who was heavily involved in this work. So that was the first wave when we talk about ethic in AI. The second one was that much of the idea was focusing more on the technical problems and looking more on the bias issue, fairness. So you started to have work around, for instance, explainable AI, so you could see how the system was working and understand the output from the systems. But even here, there was some kind of criticism around the ethical discussion connected to more the instrumental focus on the technology. So most of the people that was criticizing the discussion on ethics in AI was that they thought they moved away from the root causes, for instance, of bias. and gave all the attention to perfecting the instruments, the technology. So they claim that AI has nothing to do with technology. We have to consider the socio-technical aspects, and so it's much broader than just fixing the technology. And the third way we have witnessed also is, as I said, in the system development phase, a political movement. So we can see more people are involved in controversial discussion or complaints, and they see that they want to talk about ethics, then they talk about empower the workers, or talking about tackling the lawlessness and so on. So we can see that there is different content during the different times when we talk about ethics. And the question is, what will happen now when we have had a legislation that came now from the European Commission, where we have the AI Act, and we have just installed a new office in Brussels. It was last week, I think it was last Monday. We have a new office that is called the AI office with 140 employees. And what will happen when it comes to ethics connected, for instance, to the AI Act? My personal view about that is that we will see that we adapt the discussion of ethics connected to already existing legislation in the European Commission. So what I will think will happen is that when we talk about ethics, and should we talk about fairness, hazards, bias, and so on, then we will see that the most appropriate way will be that they create some kind of shared definition, procedures, structures connected to already standard procedures that already exists. So I've seen that, for instance, the AI office, they will connect the AI Act towards the new legislative framework, which consists of already 26 legal acts. So there is already definitions about what means with harm or hazard, or what is bias, or so forth. So they want to adapt the AI Act to the already definition that already exists, and I think they will also connect to the standards that already exist within risk management system and quality management systems standards, because there we have all the languages and all the definitions of what a risk is for something. So we will see some kind of adaptations to the already standards. So we will not see new kind of methods or new kind of definitions around what does it mean to talk about ethical AI, because I think it will be concept that we have from these ISO standards, for instance. The challenge, though, is that current standards that we have in the new legislation framework and the ISO standard is connected to organizations. But if you read the AI Act, it's talking about the individual. So you have to translate the content of the AI Act towards organizations and not individuals. And the second thing that will happen, and we see it already, is that much of the AI system we have been using currently has been more connected to the technology. And we test the technology, we test the ChatGPT and see what can we do. We can see more and more that we are trying to develop AI system connecting to the purpose. What are the purpose of my work, or for the context? So we can already see, for instance, in education that we tries to develop AI system in accordance, for instance, from learning theories. So if you are a behaviorist, the Skinner, or if you are like Vygotsky, social constructivist, or in the connectivism, and try to implement ideas and support that has connection to some kind of learning theory, then you see that it develops AI systems in accordance with either theories, paradigm, practices, or some kind of purposes. So we will see it will continue the same procedure as the information systems from the 70s and 80s and the 90s, that it will be the purpose that govern how we are trying to develop our systems. And the last thing that I will say before I say goodbye from Digital Impact North is that I also wonder if one of the biggest challenges that we currently see that we go from text to voice, especially when we see the now ChatGPT and other kinds of solution where you use the voice in the interaction with the AI systems. And that can have a great impact of how we are designing systems, because since the development of the computer, we have been very text-based and using the keyboard. And if we are starting to use the voice like we are talking to Siri or Alexa, and how will the common system in the public sector be designed and used when we start to use the voice instead of the text-based system? That will have a great impact, I think, for us in the public sector. I will stop there.
Thank you very much, Ulf. And there's lots and lots to think about there. It just brings up the kind of timeline we are in with the new AI Act, the new AI Office, so much changing around us, and that's the whirlwind of AI. But that's a great point about the voice interface, and it's going to have to understand all sorts of regional accents properly. Yeah. But it's a great way as well of reaching out to the citizen. So thank you. And again, if any questions we'll take at the end, please put them in the chat. So now we move on to Victor Villa. And Victor is from ARNIA, the Agence Régionale de Numérique et d'Intelligence Artificielle. ARNIA from France, Bourgogne-Franche-Comté. And he is a data and AI project manager, and he's a former data and innovation consultant and a data protection officer. And he's passionate about machine learning since 2017, a fan of Python, pandas, data visualization and notebooks. And he's also a lecturer at the University of Burgundy on AI and privacy, risk and opportunities of AI in smart cities, and rurality and smart territories. Sorry, somebody can't hear? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, Victor, and please give us your presentation.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. We'll start quick. A little context about our region. We're here between Paris and the Switzerland border. It's a region mainly rural. It's located in the east of France. And you may know our region where it's colorful colors, the wine, the vineyards, the smelly cheeses, and we have many, and the very, very large snails. But more seriously, the use cases. We have a big problem, a big deal with this insect that is called bark beetle. One of the consequences of repeated traps is the proliferation of bark beetles. These small insects has a larvae that bore into the trees and kill the tree because it drills the tree horizontally. And the result is this. Under normal circumstances, bark beetles has a role in the renewal of the trees, but there are too many now, and it's become harmful, so harmful that foresters are abandoning the fir trees. They're giving up. So the problem is that if we don't cut down the affected tree quickly, the bark beetles will spread around it. But how do you find the affected trees if they're in the middle of the forest? The solution may come from the analysis of satellite images from the European Satellite Network Sentinel-2. This has open data. Everybody can take these images and use for what you want. Well, the images, you may guess, will not show the insects, but the trees that are dry and probably infested with bark beetles. Here you can see some trees that are completely dry, and we may guess that we have bark beetles here. So this is a huge task that's taken by the Geographic National Institute that elaborates this map. In this map, you can see the stand of the bark beetles in our forest. It's really, really, really high. So the next step is the foresters. They call the people who fell down the trees as quickly as possible. I will go fast. Here at Dijon, the capital from the region, we have a very nice use case in the hospital. I might say that people in hospital, or elderly people in hospital and social institutions often are not fed properly because there are no one behind to check if they eat correctly or not. So they have developed this system. You have the tray, you have a QR code on the tray, and you make a photo when you take out the tray. When the people has eaten, you pull the tray again and you make another photo, another picture. And with AI, you can make what we call object detection. And that led us to estimate the volume of the nutriments that had been eaten by the patient. And that allows to calculate the calories that had been eaten, and it's fed into a dashboard that automatically follows every patient and can send alert to nutritionists. So this is a very nice use cases in a context where we are living longer and longer with chronic illnesses, and we have no more healthcare workforces. Another use case is used by the firefighters in the region. One of the problems that are faced by fire station is anticipating the number of people who will be needed tomorrow. This uses some data like the historical interventions. There are 400 interventions record data. They use information for Google Trends if someone is searching for allergy, if someone is searching for flu, etc. And this allows the firefighters to place correctly the ambulances in the where it might be accidents shortly. So short-term forecasts enable the firefighters to anticipate the number of people needed, but long-term forecasts enable decision makers, people, to define the strategies for the future. For example, funding the renewal of the ambulances, the trucks, or for every material. Another use case is checking the state of the road. This video is very short. It's quite It's quite good because this is the work that is done usually. Someone is take his truck, runs through the city, takes the paper, makes a photo of the pothole, etc., etc. This is not efficient. This is time consuming. In the end, you have a lot of paper and you have no data to work with. If you make this with a smartphone that takes the photos, the video actually the detection is in the smartphone. Is afterwards. You will have every 4 meters a photo, a picture that is analyzed, and this allows to make this. This is a department in France. I guess this corresponds to a county in Ireland. And this is the state of the roads. And you can see with a color code which is the state of the roads, which are the priorities for renewal, etc. And you have a dashboard with every street, every road, and the state of this road. This allows to make fact-based decision making. Walker leakage is a very big deal in France. You see here in red the communities, municipalities where more of half of the water that is in the pipeline doesn't arrive to the taps. It's a very huge problem after climate change, because that means that half of the water is spread in the nature. There are many solutions to these. The first one, well known, is place the sensors between the point B and A and check how many water we have lost. You can also use sound detecting techniques that may use or not artificial intelligence to detect the sound of the leak. But LeakMighted is a startup that proposes a prediction model based upon historical data. They have parameters like the width of the pipeline, the length of the pipeline, the depth of the pipeline, if there is a road or not over the pipeline, the acidity, if it's acid, the soil of the pipeline, etc. And that allows, this is what they say, to detect 84% of the leaks in 20% of the network. Another use case is what we do here at ERNACT. Some use cases. This is a very lovely village near Dijon. It has only 80 inhabitants, 40 in the winter. And they have a big problem because they have thousands of people that come visit the castle, but they have no money to make a parking. So how can you fact check that you need a parking? We're gonna put some sensors that we allow to count the cars and the people that come to the village. And with that, the mayor can go see the regional authorities for a subsidy application. Also, we have another village where people make illegal dumping. The mayor has takes his car every day and goes through the village to find where the illegal dumping has been done, and then call technical people to take out the dumping. So he will be a very more efficient when we're gonna put our sensors and detect that for him. Another use case is in the same village, they have the money to make a big bike lane, but they have a doubt. Should we make the bike lane between the train station and the business district, or between the train station and the high school? We don't know. How can decide? We are gonna count the bikes that are translating over both bike lane, possibly bike lanes, and then make a fact-checked decision. We can also use the same sensor to check whether or not it's a good idea to removing parking space and count the number of people that go through the street. And even Crumble4 will gonna use the same sensor. You can see it here. It's like a shoe. To check, it has a microphone, so we can check if there are scooters or motorcycles in the bike lanes. And we check, we can have the hour, but at 8:30 every day, there's a peak. Well, there are many noise, so we can assume that there are motorcycles in the bike lane. And then the last one, in France, public decisions are very formally, are very time-consuming, are very maybe hard to make. At Arnia, we are a pooler. Excuse me, I have a problem with the bar. Yep. We give services to little communities, little municipalities, and this is a very evolved chatbot. I asked this morning to Soline, is his name. She can explain in English to my Irish friends, how do you help the day-to-day work in municipalities? And she says that she's an intelligent assistant. She can provide information about many topics. In fact, she has read almost 2 million the public decisions. So she knows a lot about public decisions. But also, she has new tools combined to these. She is able, I will translate for you, to make the resume of meetings. She can correct what you are writing. He can write a speech for you if you have to present something. He can even make a job description if you had to take someone new to their team. Reformulation, that's a quite nice, very appreciated, because people use often the same words when they are writing. So if you reformulate, you will have very nice writings. The idea is to put many little useful things around the core functionality that is making the draft of public decision. And that's all for me. I hope I have not been too long.
Victor, thank you very much. That was a great sweep through so many powerful use cases, from the environment with the little bark beetle, health, monitoring nutrition of patients, emergency services, roads maintenance, water leakages, planning, and then the very powerful one on the knowledge management and the public decision-making supports for all those different municipalities. So I really enjoyed that, and thank you. So we're over time, but I think we could take the questions that came in on the chat, and if anybody else wants to raise a question, we'll take the chat ones first, and then we'll open it up. So we have 2 questions for Aoife, and they're both about the upload of your documents to ChatGPT. First of all, from Rikel, there's the question, does this task run the risk of leaving essential elements out of the summary? That was your demo.
Yeah, and first of all, just to say a couple of things. So I use ChatGPT just because it's easy to use. We have a license and we can play around with it, just more as a concept. Okay, and all the questions that people have put through are all really valid questions, and questions you should be asking and getting the right answers for your organization. So first of all, yes, okay, it is possible that important information be left out. And I suppose this isn't a substitute from people actually reading the document. I think this is really, really important. That ChatGPT shouldn't be seen as a substitute for our kind of large language models, this kind of custom chatbot, of actually reading the documentation. What it can do, and when it's done nicely, is obviously I used one document. Let's say you had body documents and it gave you a summary. It might give you the documents that they're from. You should go and read those documents. You should fact check. Okay, you cannot rely on your large language model being factually correct. The language will be nice. It'll give you a nice summary if you want a business level executive summary or a general purpose executive summary. It'll do that job quite nicely, but you still need to be accountable for the information in there. And it's important that you need a way to fact check those things. So I would say it's a really good first draft of something, but it shouldn't be your final draft. You should always be checking the facts, making sure, as you say, that an important piece of information hasn't been left out. It's not a substitute for reading the document, but it does give you document structures quite nice. It does give you overviews, but again, you just need to check them. I hope that answers that question okay.
Then there was a follow-up question, Eve, as well. Thank you for that, about when you load the document, what happens to that document in the large language model? So
this comes down to, so I use ChatGPT, okay, and we have a paid version for ChatGPT, and there are different levels of that. So the first thing you have to do and check with any tool that you're using, and it's a really good question, is, where's the data stored? How is it stored? How secure is it? If we're in Europe under GDPR, is it stored in Europe? All of those questions are still valid, and you need to know the answer to those. In ChatGPT, under the license that we have, that is in ChatGPT now, and people can use it. There are other licensing options. I know a lot of people are using, and particularly in public sector, are using kind of Copilot with Microsoft, and I suppose they offer kind of more guardrails around things. So there are ways that you can protect your documentation. What I would say is, if you're testing these things out, maybe test them and play with them with publicly available documentation to begin with, so you don't run the risk of having data that is sensitive out there. If you want to use sensitive documents, and I know, for instance, the Revenue in Ireland have launched an internal chatbot, so it's only internally on documentation. So kind of a documentation finder for people within Revenue. I know that was launched last week, but I know they've spent 6 months testing it. So they've done similar to that. They have a body of documentation, their internal documentation. I'm not too sure exactly what tools they're using, but they've gone through all of the risk assessment as to where the documents are being stored. And now they've done kind of a whole rigorous amount of testing. And now they're at a point where it's only been used internally, but they don't feel confident at all to let that out, like to have a public facing chatbot yet. So they're using something internally. They're doing it kind of step by step. And they're the types of things. I think there's lots of approaches that you can take, but definitely a really key question is understanding whatever tool you're using, where your document is being stored, is it secure? If you're worried about that, there is a question mark as to whether you should use that tool at all. So I think it's perfectly fine if you can, secure your data, that there's an option to say, actually, this isn't the tool for us. Is that okay? I hope that answers people's questions.
Thank you, Aoife. There was a question for Victor, and he's answered it already on the chat about the AI solution detecting potholes. Yes, that is already available, and it's a startup called Violytics. So thank you for that, Victor. And we have a hand up from Gary. Gary, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, just want to make some comments and see any commentary. The public, thanks for the presentations, they were brilliant. The public decision making, that's going to be huge. Governments using AI to make public decision making. When you look at technologists that are actually building these models, they have a different perception than cognitive or behavioral scientists. So the ethics that's going to be involved in government AI is going to be huge. Who's going to decide the ethics? You'll have the tech guys building it away there, who's going to decide the ethics? The tech guys cannot decide ethics, in my opinion. Not all the time, some of them can, but there's two different streams there. They have to. I'm just wondering what particularly in public decision making, where there's inherent bias in people, in designers, in the systems, they're going to come to fruition throughout time if it's not looked after. But who's going to make those decisions? I see the strategy for AI Ireland. Who's making them? Who are the people that do it? Anyway, that's one comment. The second comment is, yeah, I've used a lot of them for a while. Chat, Gemini, Grok. Been using Grok for a good while now as well. They're all really, really good. They're coming along nicely. They're making the mistakes, as we said, if you have to verify everything. But what if we look at the Irish water system? There's massive leaks here. Those use cases that Victor did there, they were fantastic. If we look at them, is there much work involved in getting a model, building it, putting it into the Irish water system? Those companies that are doing that, can we copy those models? I presume they're proprietary information, but let's say I'm looking to build a model myself. I've done some courses on building cat detectors and simple course with Andrew Inge, and I want the model that's going to predict wave heights. I live with the sea here, down a sensor and stuff, or even there's a disease that affects oysters. So when you look at the beetle there, predicting those models, is this a big organization that can build those models, or can an individual using collabs, using the materials there, build little tester models with these things? Those are my two questions.
Thanks, Gary. So we have two questions there. I think the first question on the ethics side is a very valid one, the importance with the AI in government. And I think maybe Ulf, you might be able to address that one.
Yeah, I can say it's interesting to see who's in charge of deciding upon the system, and the tech guys, as I can't be in charge of this, and when it comes to develop of the future society, I think that we have already common methods of working with citizen-centric methods or crowdsourcing and so on. So the issue is who will be the ownership of the solution, and the ownership of the solution has to decide upon how do you want to work with the design and implementation of such kinds of systems. And if you have the idea of implementing, for instance, a citizen-centric, then you need to have the different kinds of people from different areas, and the population has to be in a democratic way. And so the ways of dealing with this, I think we have the methods, but still the ownership of the system, will it be the tech guys who will decide, or will it be the buyer who has to understand what is needed to get the adoption of the system, the approval of using, and the trust of using the system? So I think you need to work with more citizen-centric or user-oriented methods to gain trust with the use of technology. But the techniques and tools exists.
Thanks, Ulf. And Gary, your second question was practical about the building of these models, like transferring the water leaking or the something like beetles into the Irish context. So I don't know, Aoife or Victor. Victor's going to take that one for us. Thank you, Victor.
I can answer it quickly, and then maybe get Victor to add in. Just on your last question, an interesting thing in the Irish market that the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, they're looking at a project around life events, and that idea of, they've brought in Trevor Vaugh, who is a systems designer, to kind of make a very holistic approach with how public services are being developed, and using a very kind of citizen-centric approach, and actually getting citizens into the room when they're designing the systems. So actually there's some really nice work being done there, and particularly around the life events program. And definitely if you want to kind of see how to generate kind of public-centric systems, that's a good one to look at. Back to building models. Absolutely. Like, can people do it with their laptop and, you know, kind of a good Python installation if you've got some good data? We run a certain AI that's a 12-week program. At the end of that, people do 2 to 3 week projects, and it dumbfounds me what people can do in 2 or 3 weeks with a laptop and a bit of knowledge and a bit of gumph. So I absolutely think for kind of prototype type models to test something out to see if something works, absolutely. One man and their laptop can take over the world-ish. So
woman.
I would say definitely. In terms of adopting some of those bigger solutions, so some of like kind of system-wise, so something for like the water network here would be a much bigger project, is definitely doable. And adopting those models here, I suppose obviously you need to test them. There's a, you know, there's a bigger kind of implementation, but the steps that you follow in those bigger projects are what you would do yourself with your laptop. It's just scale. So all very doable with the right hands. I don't know, Victor, if you want to add to that.
I will say for the water leaks, these are classic machine learning. The difficulty here is to have the data in which you are going to work. You have no need for a big equipment, I guess, to make a model, a random forest, other model, create your model. On the other hand, the public services chatbot is completely different. I will share my screen. This will be useful, I guess. First of all, you have to have the capacity to store 2 million public decisions. That means 2 million PDF documents. You have the power to translate the images. So most of the time, these PDF are images to text, and you have to the capacity, the power to translate those texts to vector database vector, as if show us later. And then you can use open models. You can see here open Mistral, Mistral Large, etc. So the pieces, the data, the models, the base models are available. Here the difficulty will be to have the power, the GPU power, to crunch all this data and provide useful information. If that can help, I'm sorry, this is in French, but this use the RAG architecture, retrieval augmented generation. I can give you the hyperlink if you wish. All the Delivia, this tool is described here with all the filters, all the functionalities. Maybe that will help you in your project. I'll put this in the conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Victor. So I guess the answer there, prototyping, of course, data is key, and computing power is key. But there's a lot of open resources support there. So,
thanks, guys.
Sorry, we've got somebody else talking in the background, but never mind. We're nearing the end. So, anybody got any more questions, and then we'll wrap up. And okay, then I think what we can do is, if you stop sharing, I'll put up the contact screen. Victor?
Excuse me. Yep.
Sorry, Maisha, could you share the contact screen? I think you had the presentation.
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Okay. So really, just to wind up, thank you to all our speakers. I hope that this session gave you a taster for the power of AI and that it can be used in a practical basis in all of your organizations. So it's food for thought. We'd like you to contact us. We'll be happy to talk to you about what Data2Sustain could do to support you. So I'll pass over to Mike to wind this up as our program director.
Yeah, Margaret, I wanted much to say again. I just want to repeat a couple of points. Yeah, the summary of all of the cases that were covered here in terms of generative AI, but of many other elements of the use of AI across environmental, knowledge management, transport, etc. It's always fascinating, makes it tremendously real. So just again, thank you to Margaret, Maisha, and the whole ERNACT team for organizing and sort of reaching out to everybody and for sort of bringing the network that they have and others to the table. I know there's a lot of people on from different diverse communities. We have been working with other EDIHs to connect and build relationships with sort of certain public bodies in the tourism and sustainability side, right through all the local authorities where we've been talking to them all in the region. But part of our objective is to be, you know, a team that can help bring people together and expose and work across the ecosystem around the adoption and application of real world use cases, either through the ecosystem model or just by doing innovation projects. And you can see from this morning's or this early afternoon session that there's a lot of food for thought. So again, thanks to Olaf, Victor, and Aoife in particular for giving of your time and sharing it. And I'm hoping some follow-up opportunities come from the session. So look forward to follow-up sessions. Thank you so much. And I know many of you have met in various places around Europe, including pubs in Ireland, and the best collaboration ideas and use cases often come from those conversations. So thank you very much.
Thanks,
Okay.
Mike. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And yes, do get in touch and we'll follow up with you. Thank you.
Fascinating stuff. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.